Kia ora, and welcome to Walking the Shadowlands podcast. Let me be your guide as we take a walk into the shadowy realms of the unexplained, of the paranormal, of things that go bump in the night and haunt your dreams.
Your hosts?
I'm Marianne. Thanks so much for joining us today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. Sit back, relax, and let me be your guide as we walk into the Shadowlands together and see what awaits us there. Hi everyone, back in season 1 of this podcast I did an episode on the Moehau man, New Zealand's equivalent to the North American Bigfoot. I tried in numerous ways to contact Australian groups who studied the Yowie, their equivalent of Bigfoot. I was unfortunately unsuccessful. I was pretty gutted about it because as our countries are so closely tied together, I felt it would be a great opportunity to share about this subject on the one episode. However, very often our disappointments and frustrations can bring about even better things, and so it is in this case. Now, throughout the world, there are stories and legends of huge, hairy, ape-like creatures that have persisted over the centuries through retellings of cultural myths and legends and of actual reported sightings of such creatures. These beings go by many different names. In North America, they are called the Sasquatch, or the more common name of Bigfoot. Across the ditch in Aussie, as I've already mentioned, they are called the Yowie. In parts of Asia and the Himalayas, they are called the Yeti or the Mete. In Mongolia, they are called the Almas. In Sumatra, Orang Pendek. In China, the Yurin. In the jungles of South America, they are called Mapingori. In the episode transcript, you can see a link to a page that has a huge list of names for this creature worldwide, a huge list. So you can see that this being goes by many, many names throughout the world. This season, I thought I'd try once again to contact anyone over there in Aussie who'd be willing to talk about the Yowie. So I sat down and wrote an email to Dean Harrison of the Australian Yowie Research website, which is linked from the episode page. And then I got on working with the Signs from the Other Side episode. To my pleasant surprise, I got a lovely email from a delightful gentleman who, as it turns out, is a pretty well-known Aussie author and Yowie researcher, Tony Healy. He agreed to share with us all his experiences of interviewing hundreds, and that's no exaggeration, of Yowie witnesses. So, are you ready to return with me into this part of the Shadowlands and see what awaits us there? Then let's begin. Since 1969, Tony has investigated a wide range of unexplained phenomena in every state and territory of Australia and in many other countries. Since the early 1980s, he's collaborated with fellow researcher Paul Cropper on many projects, notably in co-authoring Out of the Shadows, Mystery Animals Australia in 1994, The Yowie, In Search of Australia's Bigfoot in 2006, and Australian Poltergeist in 2015. Until the 90s, Tony was concerned mainly with the world's many super elusive, apparently uncatchable cryptids, yetis, Sasquatch, yowies, lake and river monsters, out-of-place black panthers, thylacines, etc. However, his focus widened to encompass all manner of even wider and even more wonderful phenomena, such as UFOs, Min lights, ghosts, little people, and Blessed Virgin Mary apparitions. In 1998, after a series of fortuitous coincidences, he and Paul found themselves embedded in the amazing Humpty-Doo Northern Territory poltergeist episode. That mind-boggling experience was the genesis of their third book, Australian Poltergeist. During all of his travels through the wide, wide world of weirdness, however, the mystery Yowie has held a special place in Tony's heart. So, with Paul, he's focusing once more on the shambling Aussie ape-man. They are working together on the Yowie file, which contains scores of recently discovered eyewitness reports dating from the early colonial era. After that one's published, Tony hopes to live long enough to finish his long-neglected book of memoirs, working title Monster Safari, an account of his 40-odd, very odd years in this arena. I'm so thrilled to welcome my guest, Tony Healy. First of all, Tony, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. So the first question I have for you is this. Can you please tell me what got you interested in the subjects you cover in your books, most notably the Yowie, which is the Aussie version of Bigfoot and New Zealand's own Moehau man? For those listeners who are not in New Zealand or Australia, and that is over 60% of you all, you may not have heard of the term Yowie before.
Yeah, well, I didn't hear a peep about the Yowie until about 1973, which seems strange because in the decade up to that, throughout the late 60s, I'd worked in virtually every area of Australia, well, every state anyway, every mainland state, and later on I worked in Tasmania. Didn't hear a thing about the Yowie, which is kind of seemingly very, very similar to the American Sasquatch. But I was working in Canada on a working holiday in 1969-70, and I was working in a logging camp up there, the top of Pitt Lake in British Columbia. And some of the my workmates mentioned the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, that would come up, you know. And I slowly realised that they were apparently taking it fairly seriously. And I thought, gee, that's pretty weird. Anyway, sometimes I'd stay in the logging camp on the weekends to save money. And I'd get my little plastic camera and toddle off around the trails in the forest thinking, could there possibly be something like this up here? And anyway, when I got back to Australia in late 1970, I got a couple of books on the Sasquatch. In fact, I started corresponding with John Green, who wrote several books on the Sasquatch. And I got quite obsessed. I got books on the Yeti, the Himalayan Yeti as well. And I thought, gee, I've got to go back and I'll go to North America and I'll go to the Himalayas. And I've been interested in the Loch Ness Monster for many, many years, since I was a kid.
Right.
So I thought, I'll go to Loch Ness as well. So I started planning this round-the-world trip, and I saved up for actually 2.5 years, and then went right around the world for 2 years, almost exactly to the day for 2 years, and visited about 12 or 14 lakes that had lake monster legend, and looked for the hairy ape men in North America, Himalayas, and down in Malaysia, and also in Andros Island, Bahamas. But just prior to going all the way around the world looking for these other things, I didn't realise that Australia had a Bigfoot legend. And I was only just starting to compile a very slim file on it in 1978 when I went overseas for this big trip. But when I got back, I met other researchers like Paul Cropper, and then started to interview people, and finally interviewed a couple of hundred people who have seen these things. I shouldn't exaggerate, probably about 100. We've collected probably 400 eyewitness accounts, and I've interviewed about 100 people. Paul's interviewed at least that number. So that's how it happened. And then we wrote a couple of books on the subject.
So how did you feel when you first heard about the Yowie in Australia? Did that make you feel really excited, or did that perhaps make you feel that these creatures had a worldwide connection?
Yes, well, it was sort of a funny thing. At first I thought, oh, no, really, don't tell me. Don't. That people are saying they see these things in Australia, because at that time I thought, well, if they exist in North America and the Himalayas, well, that's tricky enough. It's just possible they could exist in those vast forests of British Columbia, say, and Alberta, and then in the Himalayas. But I thought, in Australia too, how could this be? So it took a while for me to take it seriously, but there is definitely a very, very strong belief amongst the Aboriginal people in Australia about these creatures. They call them by various names, the Doolagal and Thulagal and Baba, Jarrawarra, many different names. And so we've interviewed many Aboriginal people since the 1970s. So, but it is strange, and it makes you wonder, really, how on earth you could have a population of presumably thousands of huge big ape men in Australia, also in North America, also in the Himalayas, also apparently in Russia and Southeast Asia. So,
and in New Zealand.
And yeah. I actually, even before I'd completed my 1 year in North America, 78, 79, I started to think there's something uncanny about these things. They're supernatural or paranormal. And in fact, the American Indians I spoke to and my research pointed in that direction. The Aborigines, I guess, as you know, Australian Aboriginal people are very spiritual people.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, there's a very blurry line between what is flesh and blood and solid and what is from, well, for want of a better word, another dimension, or the spiritual realm,
Right.
So they've said things to me like, well, you can chase these things, they're real, but you'll never catch them. You can't catch them. They're real. But, it's like, so that's essentially what the North American Indians were saying as well. And also the Sherpas up there, they were saying pretty much the same. Although my experience in the Himalayas, it was more sketchy than elsewhere, because, you have to walk for numbers of miles just to find someone who's apparently seen a Yeti, and if they're home, they might be over the other side of a mountain. So I only interviewed about, three or four people who'd seen Yetis, one European guy. And so my impression is they're so absolutely scared to death of them, the Sherpas and the other tribes people. To me, it points to the supernatural there too.
Right. So with the Aboriginal people, and in fact all the native people you've met and spoken with, so they have the idea that the Yowie or Yeti or Sasquatch is an interdimensional creature, like that can come into and out of this dimension when they want to?
Yes. Well, one American Indian guy used exactly that terminology to me. He was a policeman from the Miccosukee tribe in Florida. I went there to inquire about what they call the skunk ape.
Right.
They said, they seem to turn up here every 10 years or so, and they might kill a deer, or they'll be seen, might be seen near the houses, and then they'll go back out into the Everglades, One fellow, the village chief, Bobby Tiger, he'd backed his car out of his driveway and bumped right into one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he was the one who said, look, have fun looking for these things, but you'll never catch them. Yeah, almost exactly the same words I was told by Australian Aboriginal. But the local policeman, Don Osceola, I spent the evening with him just sort of patrolling around, and he said, look, our word for these creatures is, our term for the creatures is Yati Wasagi, which means disappearing man or different man, something like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he said essentially what we're saying is they can come and go. He's saying essentially, they're interdimensional. That's the feeling. So that's definitely my feeling. I mean, so a lot of, for instance, Yowie reports, I would say at least 30% of Yowie reports have something distinctly weird about.
Right.
Strange floating lights, or the creature just disappears inexplicably. It might run behind a tree, but the tree's not really that huge, and then it doesn't come back out,
Right.
This occurs in North America too. And then there's other stories of them. The witnesses say, well, it just vanished, I looked away or I looked at it and it wasn't there. And people get terribly, terribly scared, more frightened than you would logically expect.
Right.
I mean, if you saw a big ape, you might be a bit scared, but these people, their terror stays with them sometimes for decades.
Wow.
Yeah, scary.
I wonder if that's because of the energy put off by these creatures. But actually, what you said leads into a question I was going to ask you later, but I'll bring it up now. And that is, have you noticed that there's a link between the Yowie or Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings in the same area at around the same time?
Yeah, yes, I have. Yeah. I noticed that quite early in my time, my big expedition in America. Some of the younger investigators were saying, look, this seems funny, but every second time we go out to investigate a sighting, someone's talking about UFOs or floating lights as well. And some of the older guys, like Renee DeHinden or Peter Byrne or John Green would say, oh, rubbish, these are people you can take any notice of.
Right.
But American Indians told me the same thing right down near Bluff Creek, where the term Bigfoot was more or less coined. And, they'd actually see in daylight these silvery craft over the Klamath River. So I heard that all over the place. Also, I don't know whether this will ring a bell with you. I know you have these things in New Zealand.
Yes.
But one thing that I was struck by is that I went all over Canada and the States, and in 6 different locations, people said, are you interested in that other thing we've been seeing around here? And I said, well, what? After a while, I knew what they were going to say. They said, oh, these black cougars.
Oh, that's interesting.
Panthers, And I said, oh, it's funny. And of course, I checked, and there's no such thing as a black cougar. They don't come in black. That's out. But people would say, but they must be because we see them here. And on 2 occasions, they were seen on the same farms, in the same fields where Bigfoot had been seen. Yeah. And acting unlike any cougar or wild big cat would act, just sort of casually looking past them. And then you may not be surprised to learn that when I got back to Australia and started investigating the Yowie thoroughly, it turns out that there are an awful lot of Yowie witnesses who have also seen black panthers.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Either within a few days or within the next day, or possibly, months or weeks or even years different. But But still, it's beyond the laws of chance that so many Yowie witnesses would have seen these black panthers, which, of course, black panthers and big cats don't exist in Australia anyway.
Wow, no.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've actually ever heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in New Zealand, we have our own big cat sightings.
Mm-hmm.
There's the big black panther that's been seen mostly down the South Island, but there's also a puma-type big cat that's been seen as well.
Yes. I spent a bit of time in New Zealand in 2013 and 16, and I was down at Canterbury running around. There's some very good stories and excellent witnesses.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't hear of any link between the black panthers and the Moehau down there, though.
No. So,
in fact, I didn't hear much about the Moehau at all. I interviewed two guys. One guy and his mate saw a 6 foot tall, hair covered creature, like a bipedal, like an ape man, near Palmerston North. This was seen near Linton, which is just south of Palmerston North, by a couple of guys in December 2014. Later on, I realised that they'd seen it just at the foot of the Tararua Range.
right.
Maori say used to be a abode of the hairy man.
Correct, yes.
That was interesting. And only a couple of days before that, I talked to a guy, Paul Braxton, who told of a really hair-raising experience he had in 1965. Yeah, Paul and a mate, they were only kids, were chased by an 8 foot tall, sort of roughly human-shaped creature at New Plymouth.
Oh.
Now, this, as Paul says, this is pretty weird and pretty counterintuitive because it was on the beach in the town.
Wow. In the town?
Yeah. He might be prepared to tell you about it sometime. The fear and the absolute sort of after effect of it has stayed with him ever since for 50 years.
Oh, wow, that's a long time.
Yeah. He took me out there and showed me the spot on the beach there.
Mm.
His childhood home was just around the corner from the beach.
Right.
This was at night, and again, a strange light featured in this. A strange light was approaching from the sea, and he and his mate were saying, "Oh, what's that? If that's a boat, it's going to crash on the rocks." And closer and closer and closer and closer, and they realised it wasn't a boat. And then this great big giant thing burst out of the scrub on the bank near the water and chased them and scared the living daylights out of them. I was just trying to reach over here. I got the manuscript of the latest book. I could refresh my memory about some of these cases, if you see.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Here we are. We've divided the cases into the ones that occurred prior to 1974 and the ones that have occurred afterwards, just for ease because we have to keep throwing the manuscript backwards and forwards from Sydney to.
Right.
I was thinking of a lady I interviewed just recently. I was thinking I could, Paul says, "Oh, why not?" I said, "What about we somehow send Marianne the sound file of a couple of the interviews?"
That would be great. It would be awesome if I could use some of your interview. I know my listeners would love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I don't see why not. One from 2018 was a good one. This is Tony Healy talking to Jeannie in Western Australia on the 3rd of July 2018. Okay, Jenny, it sounds like you got a good look at that thing. A big creature, was it?
It was very big. It was like what the photos are like on the internet. It was creamy in colour.
Right.
we've got an Isuzu D-Max, and it was a lot bigger than our car. So it was quite tall. My husband's here as well, Jim, and we both saw it, and all the hairs on our arms and that all raised when we saw it. We thought, oh no. It was scary.
Yeah, I can imagine. Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the location was what you were going from Perth through Meckering towards Dowrin, eh? And you'd exited, you'd left Meckering, had you, on the road, or?
Yes, it was about 5 or 10 k's in from the Meckering turn off to Darren. It wasn't that far in, and it was, when we saw it, it was looking into the paddock, at the sheep in the paddock. So it wasn't looking facing to us, but we saw the shape of it. It had its back to us. It was standing on the side of the road.
Yeah. Geez, I wonder if it was thinking of grabbing a sheep and taking off.
Well, that's what I thought. I did ring up the Shire and let them know what we saw and how we saw that it was, looking to attack the sheep.
Did they at the Shire? Did anyone sort of act surprised, or have they heard of anything like that?
No, they hadn't heard of it before.
The area you were going through, was it scrubby or forested or open?
Open. It's like the wheat belt country over here. It was all open.
Gee, so I was wandering around. Where would the nearest forest be, do you think, or mountains there?
We don't have any mountains here. It's all flat land. All through this area is flat land. It's like wheat belt.
Yeah.
So it's undulating country, my husband's saying.
Yeah. So would there be any state forests within Cooey of where you are? Where you saw it?
State forest. There's trees. I think closest would probably be Jarrahdale Forest.
Yeah.
It's quite a fair distance from that, but there's not really any forest around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit curious. It might be old and senile like me. It might have wandered off. But
so normally found in forests, are they?
Well, yeah, or close to forested, hilly, forested or mountainous areas usually. But there are reports from way out in the desert too, like in WA and Northern Territory. But because there's fewer people, I think there's fewer sightings. But the Aborigines all over Australia know about them, so it's very interesting. But so,
read up on that. I had a look at Aboriginal, especially in Kalgoorlie area. There's been quite a few sightings around there of Aboriginals.
Could you perhaps just go through quickly what happened again, like how far away from the thing you were and what speed you were going, etc.?
Yeah, I'll put my husband on because he can explain it as well.
Okie dokie. Yeah.
Well, we weren't travelling that fast because we were travelling at night, and my wife doesn't like me travelling fast at night, so
Sure.
We've been travelling down that Meckering Darren Road probably for about 10 or 15 minutes. And I got those LED big spotties on the front of the car, so they light up everything.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And as we were travelling along, and we saw this thing on the side of the road staring up into the paddock, and this thing would have been as tall as the car. It would have been probably a good 15 feet tall. It was way bigger than a man. Just, the arms and the legs and torso were just huge. And it was I don't know, like a grey in colour. light in colour, and we looked at each other and we thought, oh, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
And my wife saying, oh, let's go back, and I said, no.
Yeah.
I don't tempt fate. But this creature was big. It really was.
Yeah. Hey, did you just say you thought it was 15 feet tall, or did you mean 15 feet from the car, or?
No, well, I keep well to the left, so, it wasn't that far from the car. It would have been probably about 3 or 4 feet from the car when we passed it.
Wow.
I would have only been doing probably about 50 or 60 kilometres an hour, so I wasn't really going that fast because it was late at night, and it was a road that we don't travel down much, and I thought we'd just try it, so we're taking it quite slow and easy, and we got a good look at this thing as we went past. And when you consider the size of my vehicle, it's 6 foot tall, about my head height or just over 6 foot, and this thing was way bigger than that.
Oh, right. Still, 15 foot is like really, really huge. I mean, you'd think.
Well, yeah. It may have been. It may have seemed, but maybe it might have been, 7 or 8 foot, but it was really, really big.
Jeez, man. Wow. And how about in terms of...
Up against the car, it looked really big up against the car.
Wow, yeah.
And something like that, I don't scare easy, but, something like that, I wasn't going to turn around.
For sure, yeah. So I gather it was on the left-hand side of the road, like looking left,
yes.
was it? Yes. you would have passed it pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was on my wife's side, and she was almost right next to it.
Yeah, wow.
That's what it seemed like.
Yeah, and with those brilliant lights you got, geez, and how about in terms of like its shoulder width and general build, the shape of it?
Yeah, well, when you look at people saying this guy's shoulders were like axe hand, an axe handle width. Well, they'll broader than that.
Oh, right. So big bugger, yeah.
Yeah, it was huge.
Jeez. And did you notice...
The length of the arms were really long.
Uh-huh.
And the legs. So its torso was quite long. The hair on the body was quite long.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Did you see any detail of its hands or feet at all?
No. Well, my wife did, but I was driving, so she probably got more of a look at it.
Yeah. And how about the shape of its head and neck and so on?
It was full of hair. His neck was all covered in hair as well. I've seen pictures on it online. It looks a bit like the Yeti.
Oh, the Yeti. Oh, yes.
Yeti,
Yeah. It seems
but
like,
It was just really hairy all over, and his arms were like, he had his arms hanging down, but they were really long.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got a better look at it because I was like, it was on my side.
Sure.
So I saw it, and it was huge. Jim's saying it was 7 foot. It was a lot bigger than 7 foot. It was just massive. It was, and the width of it was really wide as well.
Jeez.
Yeah, so the hair, it had wide shoulders, a sort of a smaller head, but it was all hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It didn't have a very long neck, but just...
Yeah. Yeah, no, that certainly answers the description of that we've heard many times of Yowies. So, yeah, so I gather you didn't see its face, or it was turned away from you slightly, was it? Or?
It was looking into the sheep, into the paddock where the sheep was. So it didn't turn around or anything. So.
Yeah. Geez, it was playing it pretty cool, wasn't it? It didn't seem to be scared of you.
No, well, it looked like it was going to go and pounce some of those sheep. It was like more interested in the sheep.
Yeah.
It was looking into the paddock away from us.
Yeah. And Jenny, so you saw its arms. Did you sort of manage to see any of its hands at all, or?
It had like black in its hand.
Ah, black.
So his hand was facing back to me, but his arm was down, his hand was facing back, and it had like black paws.
Ah, right.
Black hands.
Black, sort of on the palms of its hands, or on the back of its hands, or I suppose.
Palms. On his palms.
Yeah. Well, that agrees with what we usually get told too. The skin is usually a very dark black to brown coloured skin. Yeah. Wow. Gee, that was really something. So you saw it. Well, was it a straight stretch of road, like, or did you come around a bend and then see it, or what?
No, straight. Straight.
Yeah.
But we had the high beams on the light, so and we have like the bodies on as well.
Yeah.
LED bodies, so it was crystal clear. It was like it lights up the night as daylight.
Yes. Oh,
so
yeah.
Very crystal clear when we saw it.
Yeah. Oh, you got to have those sort of lights out there with all those roos around, haven't you? So, yeah. Oh, gee.
We live in Gavin, so we were coming back home late at night. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Gee, I tell you what, that's a really good sighting.
Stephen Kelly had 3 sightings near a town called Broke, New South Wales, in 2015, 2016 and 2017.
Wow, 3 sightings.
On the same stretch of road. He reported the sightings to Australian Yowie Research in Harrison's site in May 2017, and Paul Cropper went up to the town of Broke and interviewed Stephen and his daughter later that month. Anyway, the first sighting was between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m. on the Broke Road, and this may have been significant. This may ring a bell with you too. There was a very large thunderstorm happening. Thunderstorms seem to crop up, well, not all the time, but occasionally, suspiciously, at the same time as Yowie reports. And this part of the road where they saw this thing was also crossed by high tension wires,
right,
electricity wires. So that too tends to crop up.
Mm-hmm.
People often see Yowies in the vicinity of electrical lines. Anyway, he said we were coming down the hill and there was this thing standing slap bang on the left-hand side of the road, right next to the bitumen. I spotted it and thought, oh, a kangaroo, but it wasn't a kangaroo. It didn't move. And I thought, that's pretty big. And my daughter said, what the hell is that? And then it stepped back into the tree line, went back maybe a metre, and would have been about 3 metres from the car as we went past. It was extremely tall. The head and shoulders would have been way above the roof line of the four-wheel drive. I looked straight at it. I could see that it didn't move away, but it turned to face the vehicle. So that was the first sighting. He said we had a very good look at its torso. if it was a human, you'd say it would have been on steroids. Very muscular chest, very wide shoulders, 1.5 times my chest size easily, 3 feet across the chest, really wide, not much of a neck, big muscly shoulders with no neck. So dark hair, a lot of dark hair all over the chest and the body. Second sighting in June 2016, coming down the same road, came down the hill again. I took my foot off the accelerator because there were kangaroos about. There is an old dam down the bottom of the hill. This was 5:30 p.m., not dark, and I could see this Yowie very clearly, plain as day. Now, on that occasion, it was just walking away from the road towards the dam. The third sighting was not so definite. It crossed the road in front of the car when his wife was in the car.
To see him in the same area so many times, well, I'd be scared to go down that road, frankly.
Yes, yeah. But I think, of course, Paul didn't, you hesitate to suggest this to witnesses, but I mean, a lot of people drive that road from time to time. Why should this man see Yowies there 3 times and most people never see them?
Right.
I think he's probably a little bit psychic.
Right.
I think a lot of witnesses who have repeated sightings are a bit or very psychic.
I think I agree with that, actually, yeah.
Perhaps I could tell you one story off the top of my head because I know it very well because I met the guy and it happened in 1979. This fellow was 15 years old and he was working on a cattle station, Ardmore Station, west of Mount Isa, very, very isolated area. There were Aboriginal and white stockmen, and a huge property, hundreds of square miles. And they were having lunch. They were just sitting on the ground eating their lunch, and there was a vehicle. One of their vehicles was behind them, and there was this is a rather sad bit, there was a dog there, only not much more than a pup, and it was tied to the wheel of the vehicle. And they were talking and looking the other way, and all of a sudden the dog started shrieking, and they turned around, and there was a 5-foot-tall ape man, not heavily built, but was covered all over with hair and doing the old ape man slouch, and it was staring at this dog, which was going absolutely nuts. And this was just very close behind them, just like a matter of 20 feet behind them. And they could see it clearly. It was right there. And the dog just suddenly just dropped. And this creature didn't turn its head to look at the men. It just walked off out of sight. And the Aboriginal guys, when everyone got over their fright, the Aboriginal guys were yelling out, "Junjari, Junjari." And the guys are saying, "What the hell?" And they went up and the dog was dead.
Oh, wow.
This thing had frightened it to death. And horrible. The Aboriginal guys tried to track the Junjari, and they could for a while, but then they just lost the tracks. It, again, is very, an often told story.
Right.
Anyway, the Aboriginal guys said, this is very unusual. We've seen them before. Now people see them, but white people hardly ever see them. And to have it right, broad daylight right behind them like that. Shortly thereafter, the old guy who was in charge of the horses had left the property. So this guy, at the age of 15, was put in charge of all the horses. When they drove all these hundreds of cattle from one part of the property way down to the other part, he would have to take the horses either, I think, ahead of the herd, and 50 horses big job for responsibility for a young guy. And he'd have to take them for miles and miles and miles, and then take them down, make camp, get everything ready, and then the other guys would turn up. Anyway, he had to go through this place where they'd seen the jungery. And anyway, he said he went through and the horses were all skittish, and he felt the hair on the back of his neck going up, which is, again, an often mentioned feature of Yowie reports. And it freaked him out. Thereafter, in his life, he had a couple of odd experiences. He saw a couple of UFOs in another area.